Across the river in Missouri, two of our best softball teams went head-to-head this afternoon. Let's head over to Monroe City. That's where the Lady Panthers were playing host to the defending Lady Tigers state champions. Top of the first inning, Canton would strike first. Allie Ruffcorn hits a hard ground ball to the second baseman. MZ would make the play, but Macy Fisher would come in to score up the fielder's choice. More from the Lady Tigers. Kinsey Biggerstaff with a blooper into shallow left field is able to bring in another run, but the offense would come to a halt. Monroe City's Audrey Youngblood wheeling and dealing in the circle today as she records her first strikeout. Lady Panthers now up to bat. Abigail Smith in the box with a chopper to short. She would be thrown out at first, but Monroe City would score their first run of the game. Monroe City offense would keep firing on all cylinders after that, and they would take down Canton 7-2. Youngblood was 3 for 3 with a double and an RBI to go along with 10 strikeouts in the circle. Let's check out some other area softball scores.